I feel the need for speed. Hi, and welcome to Speed's channel. My name is Duncan Speed Smith, and I'm a certified general contractor in the state of Florida, and I've been in the construction industry for over 30 years. I created this channel as a resource for you to gain a better understanding of the activities and processes related to construction. In this video, I'm going to be looking at or discussing what to look for when buying a house. Let's get started.
You know, I've had a lot of people over the course of my career in construction, people that I've known, just people that I've had conversations with, friends of family, would contact me and ask me, you know, hey, I'm getting ready to buy this property or build a house. What do I need to look for? And I started thinking about it, and I was like, wow, what do you look for? You know, there are so many things that I take for granted now because I've been doing it so long that it's just second nature when I walk into a structure, whether it's a residential home or it's a commercial building, to start checking different components of that structure. And so I had to back up, and I kind of thought, you know, let me go all the way back to when I bought my first house. I wasn't in construction at the time. It was back in the early 90s, and the home looked okay, looked good. You know, the only thing I could trust was that the realtor that was representing me had checked certain things, but it doesn't mean they're going to. Unless you ask, more than likely those things aren't going to be even brought up, because all they want to do is transfer ownership. They just want to sell that property to the new buyer. And that's part of what it is. Now, I think now people have started asking more and more questions on certain aspects, various different information, just based on things that you've seen over the years, at least that I've seen over the years, that could be a big problem. One of those is the termite bond. You know, is the property bonded? Is there any termite activity? At this point, you know, you probably want to do an inspection or have an inspection done by a company that specializes in that, because that for Florida would be your biggest impact to that home, is if termites were in the house, you know, or you know, had been in the house. So the other thing that I started looking at when I was going to buy this house, I had no idea. I didn't know I needed to check the roof. How old is the roof? I don't know. You know, how old is my AC system? Don't know. Didn't even cross my mind at that time. And, you know, what kind of plumbing is in the house? So, you know, is my electrical panel labeled correctly? You know, these are all things that I know now based on things that have happened throughout the course of my career, and just knowing how different roofing components are going to survive in the Florida heat. So, you know, I remember seeing granules at one of my downspouts. Now, I had gotten into construction while I still owned this home about midway through the 90s. And I remember I had different subcontractors that I could always question, you know, ask questions to, and, you know, see what they would tell me about what was going on. And I had a handful of different roofing subcontractors that we used. I was with a national company at the time. And the very first guy I talked to said, yeah, if you're seeing granules coming out, you know, on the ground, doesn't even have to be out of your downspout or your gutters. It could just be on the ground at the eave where the water's running off of the roof. He goes, that means that shingle is starting to deteriorate. Doesn't mean it's going to break down and cause leaks or anything immediately. He goes, but it is going to need to be, it's letting you know that it's in the need of being replaced. So within a year or 2 or 3 at the most, you're going to have to replace that roof. And I was like, okay, awesome. So I learned something I didn't know before. And one of the other things I was doing, I was in the process of remodeling this house so that I could build my first home. And I remember, again, looking at the house from the road, it didn't look bad. Yeah, the paint was the original paint, I believe, and it definitely needed to be repainted. And I'll never forget when I talked to some of my painting subs, and they're like, well, is it going to need to be pressure washed? Is it, how bad is it right now? Is the paint flaking off? And I remember going home after talking to one of them, and I rubbed my hand down the wall, and I had like a white residue on my fingertips. So I reached out to my painting rep and said, hey, what does this mean? And he said, well, the paint is basically breaking down. It's emulsifying, and that white that you're getting is like the chalk. It's part of the makeup of the paint. Now, I'm glad I called my rep, because what they had come out with was a product called Loxon. And Loxon actually seals the existing coating that's on that building. So you don't have to waste the money to pay someone to pressure wash the entire house and then hope that the new paint is going to reseal everything. So this Loxon sealer seals the finish, whether it's stucco or siding or whatever it is. It seals that, so when they apply the new paint, it adheres much better than if you didn't use the Loxon. At the time it was called Loxon conditioner. So now a lot of builders started incorporating that into their painting package because it just helped the paint last longer. It helped it, when applying it, helped it stick to the building. So that was something I, again, didn't know, learned. I wouldn't say I learned it the hard way, but it was definitely another thing that I learned. And when I was going to sell the house, again, this home had the original AC unit in it. I bought the house in 93. It was built in 84, and I was selling it in 2001. So the AC unit was max life. It had to be max life. And I was fortunate that I didn't have to replace it when I sold it, and that the new buyer didn't say anything. But now that I know that as well, I would look at any structure I'm going to buy. What's the age of the AC unit? Especially the condenser outside, because it's exposed to the elements. The other one is plumbing. What kind of plumbing is in that structure? Now, that first house I bought, they used copper. And for residential homes, I do not like copper. My parents' house growing up had copper. Anytime there was a leak, my dad would locate the leak, and I was the guy that got to get down under the house. And this was a slab on grade, so I'd have to dig out along the side of the house and climb in under and find the leak and cut it and sweat new copper on to get it fixed. So I learned when I was young, and this was before I ever even got into construction, stay away from copper. So those are kind of the key components of the house that most people don't look at. The other big one is the electrical. And I'll go into more detail in each one of these in future videos. But on the electrical, you want to locate your electrical panel, and you want to make sure the breakers are labeled and everything is working. So if you're buying a home that, say, there's no power on it, it's going to be kind of hard to check that. But if there is power on the house, which I would hope there is, because the structure needs to stay conditioned. So unless it was just, shut down and sitting for a period of time, you can go in and fire everything back up. But really the home is meant to be in conditioned space. The flooring, the cabinets, the wall, just the interior structure. So that's another big one, that I would make sure that the breakers are labeled and the breakers are working. The only way you're going to know that is obviously there has to be power on the property, and then you can go through and start turning things on in a room and going to the breaker panel and flipping it off and see if it's shutting things on and off. So those were kind of like the key things that we're going to be the most expensive to either have repaired or replaced. Water heater is another one. What type of water heater? How old is the water heater? So
those are the main things that are going to cost the most to fix and or replace. So I would, definitely at least check those 4 things. But there are many other things to consider as well. One is the biggest factor that you're probably even looking at that property is the location. How far is it from your work? If you have a family, where are the schools that your children are going to be attending? Is there transportation to those schools, or is that something you're going to have to take care of? How safe is the neighborhood? And then noise levels. Are you near airports, train tracks, train station? Traffic, is it a high traffic area? And then what about neighbors? And then neighborhood safety is also a really big thing that you want to be aware of. Is the area the property is located in, is there a lot of vacant property around? This is going to mean that there's going to be future development, which could increase or decrease the value of the property. And then also, are you in a flood-prone area? Do you, when it rains, and this would only happen, you'd be able to find this out during rainy season, but do you see puddling water, or you can research the history of that specific area to see the last time that it was flooded. What type of insulation is in the building? And then also, are there any noticeable foundation or wall cracks or uneven flooring? And I mean, you're going to notice it. It'll be significant. And also mold. Mold is a big one. And that's going to tell you if there was water intrusion and or if the water intrusion was correctly treated. But that could also be another big impact to a repair cost down the road. Fit your lifestyle. Are there enough bathrooms and bedrooms in the home you're looking at? If you don't have a family currently, or you're starting a family, looking down the road, is it big enough to accommodate the family that you're planning? Is there enough storage in the garage, the attic? Is there adequate closet space within the home? And people always complained about their house after they moved into it, that the garage is too small and there's not enough closets to put all our stuff in. So that was kind of a big one that I remember from dealing with customers once they moved into their houses. What is the property size? What are the maintenance costs going to be if it's a larger property? And then parking, exterior parking. One thing you're going to need to make sure, do you have enough parking when you have family and friends over? Are there any kind of issues with not being able to park on your property? How is the home orientated? Is it a north-south, east-west? This is really kind of key depending on where the windows are located on the house and what is known as the exposure of the home. So if you have the majority of the windows are on your east and west walls and the home is orientated north to south, that means you're going to be getting a lot of radiant heat in those windows. So that's something you definitely want to look at. That's also another thing that people would bring up, about blinds or some kind of shade or some type of more performance rated window. And quite honestly, the only way you're going to really minimize the radiant heat on your windows is to have some kind of either a shutter or an awning, or blinds and tent will minimize the heat, but you need to stop the sun from hitting the window directly. And a lot of people will try that with vegetation, landscaping. And if the landscaping is big enough, then that works. But if you're planting landscaping that's going to take years to grow, then you either have to deal with it while that takes place, or you look at alternative methods. And if you are looking at renovation or repair costs, you definitely want to get some estimates, prior to buying the home, to make sure that you didn't overpay for the house and now you're going to have to fix a lot of issues with the home. So, those also are something I mentioned before. Those become negotiating items, if you will, that can help lower the cost of the home, or, the owner has to fix it before the closing. Another area you want to look into are the appliances. If the home has appliances, the age of the appliances, are they still functioning? And, again, if they're old appliances, then that becomes another negotiating item if the buyer is open to that. But again, these are things that they may just say, it's as it is, and you either buy it or you don't. And then you need to weigh out what are those costs. Most likely, if they're older appliances, you're going to want to update those appliances anyway. So, but it's still something to keep in consideration. Natural light and ventilation is another area you want to look at, and most buyers overlook this, but it definitely can affect your comfort, your mood, and the energy bills. So if possible, you'd want to go to the property, and if you can get access to it, both in the morning and in the afternoon and in the evening. If this is definitely the house you're considering on purchasing, a home inspection is highly, highly recommended. And make sure it's by a qualified home inspector. And other than the other items we've discussed, I would also definitely look at if there are any kind of structural defects on the property. Again, any mold issues and any termite past or present activity would be a big, big, big thing to check. What I'm going to do in the next video is get more into how do I research a particular individual, licensed individual. What do the Florida statutes that govern, and they're the rulemaking authority for the construction industry, and then what other associated organizations do you have that you can reference to really make sure you are making the best decision when you're getting ready to go under contract with somebody. So I hope this was helpful. Please provide any comments, suggestions, and I look forward to creating the next one for you. Thank you.